Hi, and welcome to the channel. So, I got a question before we get started. I just finished reading Brave Men by Ernie Pyle last night, and one of the last notes I took, because I take a lot of notes when I read, is when the Allies entered Paris, when the liberation of Paris, a lot of the citizens had went up to the troops and got their autographs. And I'm just curious today, any French viewers, if you could, do you know if your grandparents, or do you know if you still have access to those autograph books or whatever the autograph was written on? That'd be an interesting thing to check into, because I imagine at least a lot of Americans would love to see their veteran grandparents, grandfathers, or grandparents. Yeah, there were women in the military, but would love to see their autograph. Maybe a little quick family research project for you. I don't know, but let's get into the review. Hey, and welcome to my channel, and welcome to my book review of Ernie Pyle's Brave Men. So, I am a big World War II nut, so I do read a lot of World War II books, so don't be surprised to see a lot of them on this channel, including Brave Men. So, again, I'm reading another very old book and I'm reviewing it. So 1944 is when this book was published. Maybe I should just keep it on my lap instead of putting it down. 1944 was when this was published. It was written by Ernie Pyle, a war correspondent of the Second World War. He is known for his interesting writing, where he tries to get very very close with I keep on calling veterans, but soldiers. He would go up to them and interview them. He'd work with different units. Like, he would hang out with this unit here. He'd work with this artillery unit here, this infantry unit here, this officer unit back here, and he would usually interview all the guys in the units, and he would get to know them, and also, interesting enough, he would write down their names and where they're from. Oddly enough, he would also say what street they're from, or what street they live on, and their street address, or their home address, which that's a little questionable. I don't know if that was a smart move on his part. Me personally, I probably would keep the address out, but that's just me. I don't want the people I'm writing about getting their houses robbed while they're away at war. So he even talks about a veteran from my town, Youngstown. I forget his name. I did look him up though, because I was curious after reading it. But oddly enough, he was artillery. Oh, not oddly enough. That was an oddly part, but he was an artilleryman. But what he would do is he got a clothing iron from his sister, who lived in Chicago. And what he would do is, instead of ironing his clothes, because he didn't want to be the odd man out, so he would cook dinner with his iron, which I don't. I seen that one commercial with the college dude that grills his grilled cheese with his iron, but I don't know, that maybe that's just a Youngstown thing or something. That seems like something you wouldn't do naturally. But I digress. This is a good book for the reason I feel it is boots on the ground. I know technically he wasn't a soldier, he was a war correspondent. He was a veteran of, I think, the First World War. But, yeah, he was a war correspondent, but he would be with those soldiers up front, and he talks multiple times about jumping into foxholes with them and taking cover with them and getting shot at with them. So I would say this is boots on the ground, plus because he also talks to other soldiers and gets their points of views. And I don't know, I feel like that's very important when you're talking about military history, war history, history in general. Try to get people that were there, their perspectives, not just the after action reports by the generals or whatever. So, who is Ernie Pyle? Ernie Pyle was a war correspondent, like I said. He lived in Indiana, but he moved to New Mexico. The introduction was by G. Kurt Pitchler, and he actually did a little history on Ernie Pyle. He was married. He traveled the United States interwar period. She was apparently a bad alcoholic, so he kind of distanced himself from his wife. You know, sometimes people have weaknesses, right? But I digress. So Ernie Pyle, during the war, he was a war correspondent, of course. How many times am I going to say that? Sometimes I say things a lot. I wonder if we start drinking games, but then alcohol poisoning would probably be a bad. You got me alcohol poisoning. Never mind. We'll just. But anyways, Ernie Pyle's career, or his time during World War II, he was in Africa. This book focuses more on the European theater. He was in the invasion of Sicily, known as Operation Husky. He was in Italy. He was also in the Anzio invasion, or not in it, but he went like a day later, or a couple days later, and landed and went with the troops around. I gotta read a book about that too. It's somewhere. But he also talks about his time in Italy, getting ready for Operation Overlord, and he also goes over the Normandy beachhead. If you don't know, so Operation Overlord happens. D-Day. Everyone calls it D-Day, but I'm a history nerd. I got called Operation Overlord. There was a lot of D-Days in World War II. There's a lot of D-Days today. But when Operation Overlord started, it took like a month or two for them just to get out of Normandy. They were stuck there for a long time because the Germans were just holding out for such a long time, and the terrain of Normandy was so awkward to fight in. So he talks about the fighting there, and then he talks about the breakout. And then the breakout battle, which is interesting. I read James Holland's book about D-Day. I forget what it's called. But he talks about the moment when they were getting ready for the big push, and then they had the B-17s flying over, and they were bombing everything ahead of the troops. But there was a mistake, and some of the bombers actually bombed the U.S. troops themselves. And Ernie Pyle talks about actually being involved because he was up front with one of the companies that were going to go on the big push. It's definitely an interesting book if you're interested in boots on the ground stuff. I actually have another book I recommend too, but we'll talk about that later. So, what else can I say about Ernie Pyle? Oh, right. So after Paris, he leaves and goes back to the United States. I imagine he gets a little break in. And then he goes to the Pacific. And sadly, that's where his story ends, because during the invasion of Okinawa, he is shot and killed by a Japanese sniper. And sadly, we will not get any books from that. Or probably, maybe he has some leftover stories. But sadly, we won't get that overview that he does in this book, because what he does in this book, he does give his opinion about such things as battle and I just know such things as battles, soldiers' mentality, how like some soldiers, they could go through the craziest nonsense of war and hell, and then they take a break for like a week, and then they're ready to fight again. So, did I like this book? Let's talk about it. So, the things I liked about this book. Yes, I like the fact that it's boots on the ground, and he does get very personal with the troops. And he also talks about things that you wouldn't really think about. Like at the beginning of the video, I talked about the autographs. I didn't know about that, and I like to think myself as a big World War II historian nut, but sometimes you don't know everything, right? And that was definitely something I didn't know. I gotta figure out a way to share my notes with you guys because I think that'd be interesting. But I digress. The writing is good. I want to say the characters, but the stories are good. The individual stories are interesting. And yeah, I would say with positive feelings, I give this book 4 stars out of 5. If you're following me on Goodreads, you'll know that I gave it 4 stars there, and Amazon. I don't think you can see my Amazon reviews, but what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, so I would say this book is good, really good. 4 stars. 4 stars is really good for me. I think. It's when you start getting to 2 stars and less is when it's like, oh, oh. That's what my novel doesn't get done. Quick little plug-in. My novel, Black Monday, right here, is coming out on the 31st of October, Halloween. You can also pre-order it now if you want. If you like zombies, you like apocalypse, you like survival, you like cops, military veterans, bikers, and a bunch of other different individuals, check it out. But let's continue on now. The things I disliked. So, what didn't I like about this book? So, let me go over my review system real quick. How I give stars. Okay, so my first point for a star is it opinionated? Ooh, I could actually take 3 stars, but nah, it's 4 stars. Opinionated too much, which I mean is when the author puts so much of his own opinion in, it feels like you're not really learning something about the thing. You're learning more about his opinion of what happened, which I guess your opinion matters, right? Do you think authors should put their views into their books, nonfiction? Fiction, they could if they want. They could work in it, whatever the hell they want to. But nonfiction, I do feel like there's got to be a bar. Like, you cannot go past this bar when it comes to your opinion. If you do, are you credible enough? And I don't mean like college degree, but like nonfiction writers are kind of journalists, and you got like same thing. You have to have the view of what a good journalist is, and that's one that does not sell for only one political side or one side of the event. They tell a story from both sides and try to tell you all the facts so you could come up with your own view, right? Great. Now we got that out of the way. Star 2. Now this is why I took a star off, and that is sometimes you ever get that feeling you just don't feel like continue reading? Like I a few times that happened in this book where I just didn't feel like picking it up, and I had to force myself through. And that's no knock on the author. Maybe that's just me. I have autism, right? So maybe that my autism just affected me more. But I feel like a book for me, if I can't sit down and read through it and not get bored, or well, actually that's 3rd star, bored. But 2nd star is yeah, can you go back to it? 3rd star is it really too boring that you can't even read it. Now, my belief on nonfiction books and fiction books is if you can't enjoy the story, if the writer can't keep you hooked, what's the point of reading it? Now, understand, you could say, well, I want to get the facts, right? Well, if you're so bored, you're not interested. And so that means you're not retaining any of the information. It's like reading a college textbook that you don't really care about, you just want to get the answers for the quiz. It's kind of like that. You're just looking for the answers for the quiz, but you're not really retaining any of the information. That is where my point comes in. I feel like I should be able to read the whole book and retain it, and not because I just like the information, but because I enjoyed the book, and I enjoyed this book. I never really. I don't know how much I retained it. Maybe I gotta review my notes, and my memory will come back quickly. But I would say it's a 3 stars so far, and minus the 1 star. So what's the fourth, fifth? I forget. I written them down a long time ago, and I try to keep to it, but notes, especially for nonfiction books. Fiction, I kind of changed that, but for nonfiction books, if I'm not learning anything from the book, and the way I tell is notes, right? So I took, how many notes did I take? Let me check. Alright, so that's at least 20 notes for me, which maybe that could be another star taken off, depending on the size of the book. But 20 notes is good, especially since it's a subject matter that I kind of read about often and watch documentaries about. So, am I learning? And I say yes for this book. I did learn. And then my fifth star. Okay, and the 5th star is grammar and punctuation and just writing. Like, I'm not gonna judge anyone on their grammar, punctuation, and whatnot. Especially back in the 40s when they didn't have Grammarly to hold your hand like they do nowadays. You know, I'm a Grammarly user. I'll admit it. But yeah, it's a thing though. When you're reading something, you just can't get through a sentence because it's poorly written. I think the example of this is I'm not going to name the book, but I read a zombie book or started reading it like 5-6 years ago just to see how a zombie book is written for my book, or an example of how my book could be. And like the author was just not putting any punctuation into his book. It's like not even quotation marks. So I had to like sit there and guess. Oh wait, was that dialogue? How was I supposed to know? You didn't even put any dialogue marks in your book. Like that's when you start having issues. So that is my 5th reason for a star in this book. Yeah, he quotes. His punctuation is good. He is a journalist or a war correspondent, so he should know how to write, right? But yeah. So in the end, do I think Brave Men is worth reading, especially in 2024, 1944, right? Does it still hold up? There's plenty of other like James Holland's, Max Hastings. You can read their books; they're more updated. You know, a lot more documents have been unclassified. I would say, yeah, this is still worth reading. You know, it's still good to go back to the stuff that, you know, maybe they don't have access to all the facts yet. But it gives you the perspective of that time. So, some reason I think, like for example, modern society, us, or at least my perspective of it, is we look back at the 40s generation, they're just hardcore, right? Like the baddest people ever. They went for the Great Depression, they went for World War, they grew up in the crazy time, right? But they're still human, and like Ernie Powell does, and show how like the soldiers' perspective is like, yeah, this is kind of BS. Why is there a war? What? Now, of course, they don't know about the Holocaust yet, or at least it's not as blatant as they will find when they go further into Germany. But it's like that scene from Band of Brothers at the end when they're in the back of the truck and Tom Hardy's character is like, "Huh, the Germans are bad." Well, yeah, well, now they know why. But technically, like at this time, 1944, 1943. All they know is like the reason why you're shooting at this guy is he just killed your friend, or he shot at you, right? Or they just allied with the nation that attacked Pearl Harbor, right? Well, you guys, I don't know why you attack, join with them. They're the ones that attacked. Whatever. Fine, you get some too, right? Like that fat electrician joke. You didn't touch the boats, but you could get some too. So, yeah, if you have the chance to read this book and you have the time, I understand. If you looked at my list of books I want to read, if I turn the camera, you'll see my big stack of research for another novel I want to write. It's hard to fit in books, and I'm not an audiobook person, so maybe if I was, I could fit in a lot more, but I don't know, I just can't focus with audiobooks. But so, like me, I gotta pick my books carefully. Not carefully, but like very strategically. Like, well, reading this book would help me out with something. I don't know, but okay. So, hopefully you enjoyed that review. Hopefully you'll check out Brave Men when you get a chance. But if you want to support me and my book, I'll have a link to the Amazon page down below. Black Monday, Demetrius Chaparis, if you just want to type it in Amazon. I think you have to look under Kindle though. I don't think you could just search it up weirdly enough. But if you also want to support the channel, leave a like and comment down below. And, subscribe if you're not. And finally, if you want to keep up with what I'm doing and what I'm up to, follow me on Twitter. I'm trying to do daily posts, sometimes a couple times a day. Oh man, couple times a day. Coffee's getting to me. Couple times a day, I sometimes post, depending on what is going on. If I finish reading a book, or if I feel like sharing something. But anyways, I'll talk to you guys, I think, Sunday, because what I'm going to do is, I want to do every Sunday, I'm going to do a overview of what I learned. At least 5 things I learned every week. So, check that out if you're interested. And, yeah. Thank you for your time. And I will talk to you then. Bye-bye.